Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Niraj Naik is a certified pharmacist turned holistic health and breathwork expert. Having cured himself from ulcerative colitis, he is dedicated to helping others restore their health and improve their overall quality of life with holistic practices and lifestyle changes, where stress and gut issues are a contributing factor. A professional musician, Niraj has produced music that is used in wellness centres and spas internationally. He is also the founder of SOMA Breathing, the global breathwork movement taking the world by storm. He's a Mind Valley and Hay House author, creator of the world's most viral infographic, a serial entrepreneur, and one of the world's most sought-after spiritual ceremony facilitators. Niraj, welcome to the show.
Hi, absolute pleasure to be here.
Awesome. It's great to have you on because SOMA Breathwork has literally, like I said, been a movement that's just taking the world by storm. So we need to talk to you about it. We need to find out more about it. And I personally have had some amazing experiences with breathwork and have found just quite unbelievably how much of a difference it's made in my physical activity as well as just my daily life. So I can't wait to talk to you about it. So maybe you could kick off with, first of all, telling us, how did you get into breathwork and you know, being a pharmacist and how did breath basically help your issues?
Yeah, sure. So actually I was a community pharmacist several years ago, and I was working in the community pharmacy in the UK, and that's where I really discovered like what the healthcare system's like. And I just saw big like problems with it in terms of people just didn't seem to be getting better at all. You know, people were getting worse, and I didn't understand how this can be considered a healthcare profession. And so anyway, after a few years of absolute disillusionment, I ended up getting very sick myself with a chronic illness, ended up housebound for a year with an autoimmune condition, which was definitely brought on by stress and emotions and, well, negative emotions like manifesting. And then literally I was in like a really bad place for a year, housebound, couldn't leave my house, shitting blood like 40 times a day with an autoimmune condition called ulcerative colitis. And doctors gave me two choices. You either be on a drug that hasn't been tested before, or you can have your colon removed. So I wasn't obviously satisfied with any of those answers. And that's when somebody luckily came to the rescue, called Swami Amkananda, who's a yoga teacher in the UK. And she said to me, look, you've got a gift. If you can cure yourself from this, then you'll be an amazing role model to other people, you know, who've gone through this, especially with your scientific background. So I'm very skeptical kind of person, but I didn't have much choice, and it was like a do or die situation. And they say that God stands for gift of desperation, and this literally was like an act of God. And then within a few months I just surrendered to learning these techniques, and boom, I was cured. And I made a pact. I was like, right, I'm going to do whatever I can to put as much scientific evidence to back up like why these techniques work. And I'm going to go on a real research, because the science back then was very vague. And I knew that if I want to reach more people and help people with this, I have to have some way to prove it. Also in my local community, like in our family friend circle and stuff, we have a lot of doctors, we have a lot of medical professionals. Indian families tend to have a lot of academics and health professionals in them. And to convince them that I cured myself was just a super challenge. And plus, my parents and everyone was so worried about me not taking drugs, not taking any medication, not doing the convention, that I had to literally escape. So as the moment I could, I discovered how to run a business off my laptop. I escaped the UK and I went on a mission, went on a quest. And I just went around meeting amazing people from all walks of life, like people who have transformed their health in many different ways, superhuman yogis, amazing medical researchers, scientists. And it took me to like a few core principles that have kind of been forgotten and missed out of these ancient techniques from yoga and pranayama primarily. So yoga is this, this famous method of, according to the Western kind of yogis, of exercise and getting fit and getting into kind of hot pants and looking good on Instagram. But actually, there's a lot more to it than that. And actually, yoga has been really misunderstood. And the way yoga is practiced in the mainstream is really off the convention of the traditional method, which was written in the sutras and which was practiced and still practiced by a lot of the Himalayan yogis who preserve this knowledge. And it really revolves around the opposite of what we've been taught. And we've been taught that we need to breathe a lot. We need to bring in lots of oxygen. It's all about oxygen. Actually, the reverse is true. It's about becoming efficient at using as little oxygen as possible and actually being so efficient with your breathing that you need to breathe less over time. Yeah, and you need less oxygen, which is a sign of actual true fitness and true health. And the carbon dioxide is the most important factor when it comes to your breathing. And being very tolerant of using carbon dioxide will actually improve your health. So there was all of these things that were unconventional that I discovered. And the primary technique that I used from pranayama that really helped me the most is kumbhaka, breath retention, and slowing the breath right down so that you breathe less and you calm the nervous system down. So I actually put together a lot of science behind this, and I had so much results myself, just helping people with their breathing practices and changing things like their lifestyle, diet, nutrition, things like that. But primarily the way they moved and the way they breathed. And I had amazing results, and that's what SOMA is based on now.
Wow, that's amazing. And so it amazes me slightly that you're a pharmacist. Surely you had a bit more faith in the drugs.
No. I mean, because you have been educated in a subject doesn't necessarily mean that you are an advocate of it. So, actually, I think some of the best things to do is to learn the opposite of what you are kind of interested in. Like if you're a fundamentalist Christian, go and study the Quran, and you'll get a different perspective on the nature of reality. Or go and become a Buddhist or something, just for a bit, and you'll get to see the other side. And actually, I had no idea what pharmacy was about, to be honest. I only did it because it was like the traditional thing to do. In Indian families, you either become a doctor, pharmacist, lawyer, or dentist, or something like that. So I actually ended up being a pharmacist because it seemed like the easiest thing to do. I'm a music producer, and I actually always thought I was going to be a DJ, musician. But that's another story in itself. But actually doing that, being a pharmacist, was the best insight into how messed up the educational system is and the healthcare system is. And you really get to see and understand the world when you actually become a profession like that, And you really get to see how the medical industry operates.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's true too. I found that sort of studying nutrition or dietetics formally, you actually realize how bad the system is. And then you can sort of see where perhaps dietitians are coming from. And then you can sort of understand why society has no idea about health and nutrition.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and it's sort of refreshing that you came to that conclusion, and knowing so much about the pharmacy industry and the drugs, and so that's refreshing to me. And you came across, or you developed SOMA by the sounds of it through your practices with pranayama and yoga. Can you talk us through, I guess, what is SOMA, and then also the other types of breath work that are out there at the moment? Because I feel like, breath work has sort of come to the surface in the last sort of 5 years, and it's almost like we've just discovered the breath for the first time. It's sort of crazy, but at the same time, it's great because people have found a free thing that is life changing.
Yes.
But can you sort of explain? Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to use the word controversy, but there seems to be different schools of breathing, like anything. But can you sort of break down those different schools, and then maybe just explain to us the differences between them, and then go into SOMA and how that sort of works?
Yeah, certainly. So, breathwork has become like a bit of a buzzword, and it's a bit confusing. What is breathwork? And, there's different styles, but primarily breathwork was with things like rebirthing and holotropic, and they really are basically just hyperventilating. That's really what they are in essence. I mean, those people who practice it will completely argue to death over the fact that it's not hyperventilation, but it is, because hyperventilation merely means breathing faster than the normal rate. Hyper, which is faster, ventilation means breathing, right? So what it means is you're breathing at a faster rate. And in holotropic, for example, which was actually invented by Stanislav Grof, who was actually one of the first psychotherapists to use LSD as a psychotherapy tool for psychotherapy. And basically what happened was LSD got made illegal, so he needed an alternative, and he discovered that this rapid kind of breathing techniques, which is in holotropic, where you breathe at fast rates, usually through your mouth, in through your mouth, and then out through your mouth. If you did that to music for like an hour or 2 hours, if you just go to music for like 2 hours, that's quite often how long a holotropic session will last. Sometimes they last even 3 hours. You would have these out-of-body psychedelic experiences, and he explained that there was a common theme amongst a lot of the people who did this, was that they would have this kind of white light, angelic kind of visions, like the near-death experiences quite often, and they'll see entities, angels, spirits, and in some cases it was extremely healing and cathartic, where people felt like they were being healed of all of their past life traumas that have happened in their early childhood and things like that. Now, that's really strange. How does breathing make that happen? So my explanation of it, going a little bit deeper, is that in the medical profession, we know that hyperventilation leads to respiratory alkalosis. Respiratory alkalosis means that you actually breathe in too much oxygen and you breathe out carbon dioxide, and this changes the pH of your bloodstream. So what that means is it becomes slightly alkaline. Now, your blood needs to be precisely at a neutral pH, or slightly alkaline pH, around 7.83. Okay. Now, if it goes off that, your body does whatever it can to compensate for that and balance and keep it at a fixed pH, because all of your body functions require you to have a fixed pH. Now, breathing is the only thing really that can really influence instantly the pH of your bloodstream. All the stuff about diet, alkaline diets, all that is just a myth. It's not true. But breathing is the one thing that directly influences your bloodstream and the pH of it. So with that said, what could be happening is if you're hyperventilating for an hour or 2 hours, then you may be invoking a change in the body that is invoking like a near-death type experience. Actually, if you read the Holotropic Breathwork books, Stanislav Grof still doesn't understand himself exactly what's going on, but maybe that's what's happening, is you're tricking the brain into thinking you're going to die, okay? Even though your body is constantly compensating for the excess amount of oxygen that's in bloodstream, but because it's going on for quite a long time, maybe your body thinks you're going to die, and then it creates this near-death experience. I don't know. That's what leads to maybe all these psychedelic kind of effects. And actually, in some cases, it can be distressing and traumatizing. In other cases, it can be very therapeutic and spiritual. But it needs to be done with a proper instructor, that's for sure. Now, there's another one that came around the same time called Rebirthing by Leonard Orr. He was also a kind of psychologist and a mystic and quite a smart guy. And Rebirthing, again, the purpose of it was for kind of catharsis and clearing like early birth trauma. Like, so according to Leonard Orr, the most traumatic thing that can happen to you is to be born onto this planet in this life. We go from nirvana and bliss and oneness to then suddenly having this physical material life. And the way we're born into these cold, sterile hospital wards with a doctor. The first thing he does is he slaps your ass and gets you to breathe because you're suffocating. So, it's not like the most kind of pleasant way to be born either. And then you're going from oneness and connection to bliss into this crazy world that we live in. So he believes that all of the world's problems are because we have traumatic births. And rebirthing was a method to heal that. Now, actually, these techniques are already in pranayama under different labels, okay? Now, actually, Leonard Orr even says, and he comes up with a story that some immortal Babaji avatar yogi who's immortal, 3,000 plus years old, directly appeared to him in a vision and taught him this method and said it's his duty to share this with the planet. So that's the Rebirthing's backstory, which some, you can believe it or not, but it's a story. So that's already a technique that exists in pranayama. And the idea, and if you look at it, actually, the method, it's probably what they call kevala kumbhaka, where you get to a state, the breathless state, also considered like samadhi, nirvana, where you don't need to breathe. You don't have the urge to breathe in or out. So it's like kevala kumbhaka. All right. This is what the yogis would do in the Himalayas and have these kind of samadhi, blissed-out kind of meditative experiences that would last for hours and hours and hours. However, we can invoke it. Anyone can invoke it by doing what I just said. And at the end of that session, like an hour, even just an hour of like hyperventilating, you'll get to a point where you don't need to breathe. You don't need to breathe in or out, and you're kind of almost like semi-conscious, and you may be having these blissful kind of journeys in your mind at the same time. Now, the problem with this is that proponents of breathwork have been using these as health promoting techniques. Now, this is not true. These techniques are not health promoting. They're not going to do anything for your physical health. Okay, they may do something for your spiritual health, but not for your general health. And the reason why is because you're creating the state of respiratory alkalosis, over-breathing, which actually leads to higher vascular constriction, high blood pressure, and it's really like something you should treat like psychedelic drugs or something like that. You're not going to do it all the time, but it has its time and place, right?
And Niraj, presumably also you're not building up CO2 tolerance, which is the whole
not at all
health benefit of breathing.
Of pranayama, yeah.
Exactly.
So the school of breathwork that I subscribe to, which comes from my own tradition, ancestral roots, is pranayama. Pranayama literally means energy control. And in pranayama, there's various techniques. It's not just one technique. So it's not really, I don't call it breathwork. It's just pranayama. That's what it is. But it's, like breathwork's become a buzzword, like meditation. And everyone understands meditation as this one technique of mindfulness, which is not true either. There's many different meditation techniques out there, not just mindfulness. And so mindfulness is one way of doing it, and it's one application of meditation. It's not the only way of doing meditation. Okay, so the same thing with breathwork. And pranayama is really more like a series of techniques of controlling the energy in your body, because these yogis understood that prana is created through breathing. Prana is energy. Now they were geniuses, because they knew somehow that we have a respiratory system which produces energy, and when you breathe in, you produce energy. Now we know scientifically that when you breathe in oxygen. Oxygen goes into the cells, and it combines in the mitochondria with glucose to produce ATP energy, which is the source of energy, currency in your body. So by controlling the way you breathe, you have direct control over the energy in your body, the production of energy. So you can actually turn on the energy production, you can turn it off, slow it down, speed it up. You can direct energy to certain areas, you can generate heat, you can cool your body down, various different functions. So pranayama actually was a school of techniques for becoming super efficient using energy or using oxygen. They also understood that actually oxygen should be treated in the same respect as fire. It produces fire. So too much fire causes stress in the body, causes oxidative stress. It's like rusting in the body. Too much, it like burns you. It's like fire. Pitta is the term they use in Ayurveda. So too little fire, the energy is not produced at all. So we need the right balance of fire. So actually, the whole of yoga actually is about creating balance. Pranayama, all of these things, which are branches of yoga and tantra, is all about creating balance in the body, right? Harmony in the body, and creating energy when you need it, and preserving energy when you don't need to use it so much. And the idea of that is that when you have efficient use of energy, you live longer. So the goal of pranayama is also to have a long, healthy, happy life with lots of strength and vitality. So the breathing practice out of them, which is actually is the foundation actually, and it's a core part of every single of the breathing practices in pranayama, is kumbhaka. Kumbhaka is breath retention, basically holding your breath. So you either hold your breath out or you hold your breath in. And there's various different types of kumbhaka. Okay. Now the kumbhaka that I have found has the most scientific benefits. The one that actually helped me the most is this. It's called Nishesha Rachaka kumbhaka. Okay, which is where you hold your breath in a certain way. You have to prepare for it, where you can hold your breath beyond the comfort zone, so longer than you normally would be able to hold your breath. What that does is it allows you to lower the oxygen levels in your bloodstream down to a certain degree, where it triggers this state called intermittent hypoxia. Now, intermittent hypoxia is this amazing phenomenon which creates strength in the body, and it makes you more efficient using oxygen, and it has this amazing cascade of different health benefits. So literally what that means is having shorter, lower than normal levels of oxygen for brief periods of time. Okay. Now, actually, the Russians have done a lot of studies on this. Okay. They have even created machines that simulates this. They're called hypoxicators. So what they do is they make you breathe oxygen and normal oxygen, and then you breathe in air at very low oxygen, and you rotate it every few minutes. You rotate from normal oxygen to low oxygen, and what that does is it gives you brief periods of this intermittent hypoxia. And what they did was they found that this has amazing, remarkable health benefits. It can reverse health symptoms. It can like degenerative health problems where, especially where restricted blood flow is a problem. So when you lower the oxygen and you become efficient and you raise carbon dioxide, it creates vasodilation. So you actually get more blood flow going to the tissues. You get more oxygen actually going into the areas where you need it. The other thing that happens is you produce more red blood cells. So your energy levels become more efficient. You become fitter and healthier, and you have better stamina and endurance. Then what can also happen, and this is what the yogis knew, was that with deeper practice, when you hold your breath for long periods of time, you actually can increase blood flow to the brain and wake up dormant parts of the brain. And this can lead to a phenomenon which the yogis call siddhi powers, hidden powers of the mind, by waking up the dormant functions of the brain, which lies in the realms of your midbrain, where your amygdala is, your pineal gland, pituitary gland. That's a whole nother story in itself. But so miraculous health benefits can happen from becoming efficient using oxygen and holding your breath for a short period of time. Now,
so Niraj, sorry to interrupt there. So does that mean people living at high altitudes or training for high altitudes would therefore benefit in the same way?
Yeah, high altitude training has shown numerous benefits, health benefits for athletes, people with diseases, and just general wellness and well-being.
And have there been any studies showing that people who actually live in those areas live longer or are healthier?
Yeah. I mean, the world's strongest army, okay, is the Nepalese Gurkha army. And the Nepalese Sherpas are famous. They're the ones who climb up to Everest. There's one guy who's climbed up to the summit more times than anyone else, something like 24 times or something. And these guys are extremely resilient to stress. They're very, very strong. They have much lower incidences of diseases. And they are like the world's strongest army. So the British and American soldiers use them to win a lot of their battles. Okay. Now the yogis, the superhuman famous yogis, like that were talked about in like the autobiography of the yogi and things like that. Actually, thousands of them actually come down to during the Kumbh Mela, which is this big religious event where they come and show their powers off. There's a reason why they go up to high altitude, because up there the oxygen levels are very low, so you have less risk of oxidative stress, and if you've got very good carbon dioxide tolerance and you can survive with less oxygen and you become very efficient, you'll feel expanded, dilated all the time. You won't be feeling all tense and contracted. Your yoga will be much easier to do, and other things will be possible, such as getting into these DMT states, the astral projection states. Endogenous DMT is released in low oxygen environments. So when you've got very low oxygen, endogenous DMT comes out, and it stabilizes the cells in these conditions. So there's a reason why yogis go and live in the Himalayas, in caves and things. Yeah.
Great. So tell us more about this kumbhaka style that you've adopted.
Yeah, so as I was saying, kumbhaka is actually the core foundation of pranayama. It's part of every single technique. And literally what it means is just holding your breath. And the Nishesha Richaka version is the core part of our SOMA awakening technique, where you hold your breath for a period of time where your oxygen levels reduce. Now, we've basically what I've done is I've created this sequence which works with music, and the music times the whole thing, and it really helps the whole process, makes it more fun. And what it does is it use rhythmic breathing. Rhythmic breathing, what it does is it allows you to blow out carbon dioxide, to breathe in more oxygen. So we're not talking about like an hour, we're talking about a few minutes. What that does is it changes the pH slightly of the bloodstream, but not to extreme levels, but just enough to allow you to hold your breath for longer periods of time, because carbon dioxide is what triggers your brain to breathe again. So when your carbon dioxide levels are low, it means you can hold your breath for long periods. This allows the oxygen levels to drop to that point where it can create this intermittent hypoxia, where all these benefits come from. So the sequence is rhythmic breathing, but rhythmic breathing that's absolutely harmonic, where you're breathing in and out at the same time, creates another phenomenon called coherence, heart coherence. So that's another benefit. And HeartMath have done lots of studies on this, where it optimize the blood flow from your heart to your brain. That alone, just rhythmic breathing for 20 minutes is an amazing way to reset your nervous system and get into these very blissful states. And that's just literally breathing in and out at the same rate. And we do it with music, so it's more enjoyable. But that's what prepares you then for the kumbhaka. So you breathe, you do the rhythmic breathing, then you breathe in and breathe out fully with no air in your lungs. And you'd use like energy locks that holds the air in. And you're holding your breath then to the point where you start to feel like you really need to breathe. Okay? And you override that state of comfort, the comfort zone, just a little bit. And that starts to trigger, and you start feeling this kind of euphoric rush, this state of intermittent hypoxia. And you get all these positive stress hormones being produced in the body, and your body adapts, becomes more resilient to having less oxygen, because your body thinks that it's going to a period of low oxygen. So it prepares, it adapts. It's exactly the same principle why the sauna is so powerful. Sauna as well, what it does, if you go into sauna, it heats you under extreme heat. Like you'd never normally be in 80 to 90 degrees centigrade temperatures, but this short period of 80, 90 degrees, it creates this heat shock. These extreme states of change, okay, of extreme heat, extreme cold, ice baths also have a lot of benefits, and holding your breath, low oxygen, for example. What they do, and I would say maybe even, and I don't know this for sure, but I know the low oxygen does, but I'm working with an expert on this at the moment. High oxygen, higher than normal oxygen, may also lead to the same benefits. And what I'm talking about is the activation of stem cells. So stem cells are cells that can turn into any other cell. Okay. And my hypothesis, which I have also derived a bit from the doctor who taught me a lot of these techniques, is that this is what explains these miraculous health benefits that we get from kumbhaka. So stem cells hate oxygen. They like very low oxygen environments. So, and they also, so there's certain types of stem cells. The ones that I think are the ones that explain this phenomenon the most, is V cells or VESL cells, which are very small embryonic stem cells. Okay. Now what these do, they are actually, they're formed in your bone marrow. They go into circulation, and they're only activated under extreme stress. So either extreme injury, extreme low oxygen, or extreme temperature changes. Now, these cells are even considered like omnipotent, which means they have the power of God, which means they can turn and replicate into any other cell in the body. They also have an innate intelligence to go to areas of inflammation and to help heal the inflammation or be part of the healing process. So that could explain why we can heal rapidly things through this process of kumbhaka, and why in the pranayama sutras is these pranayama techniques are prescribed like that, like cures, like, like you can, if you want healthier heart, if you want to grow your hair again, if you want to regain your eyesight, there's all these different ways of doing kumbhaka. So I don't think these yogis were mad. I think there's now a lot of science to suggest that these exist, these tools, that this stuff works and can be explained. Now, the next step, and I'm actually talking to one of the world top stem cell experts about this, is to just prove that phenomenon. It's very hard to do in humans. They've already shown this. Russians have shown this in animals. The stem cells are activated by intermittent hypoxia. And that also explains why these hypoxic machines that the Russians use work. But this is what I believe is the most exciting thing. Okay, now this is a true fact. The FDA want to put your own stem cells in the classification of drugs, so that only drug companies have the abilities to harness your stem cells. You don't, which is really shocking that they're going to put controls over what you do with your own body. Now, they can't control your breath.
Yeah, Niraj, that's a really good point. And just on that note, there is a petition out that people can start signing, because people have actually put their stem cells in a place, one particular company that does this, and then just recently they've found out that they don't actually have access to them now.
Crazy.
So,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry to interrupt there, but yeah, it's very worrying.
It is, right?
But we still have our breath, which is great. So on the SOMA, you mentioned that it only takes a couple of minutes to actually change your pH, albeit just by a bit. Have you got any examples of measurements of the pH in the blood, and how long it takes to change and how much it changes over time?
So basically within, I would say, 20 to 30 repetitions of rhythmic breathing, your pH will go up. It will go up and become slightly alkaline. It only needs to go to 8 and a little bit higher for it to really make a difference. Because as I said, it needs to be a very tight, intricate pH. But it's not very important. It really doesn't matter. That's not important. The pH is not important. What's important is the method, which leads to creating intermittent hypoxia. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people start doing this? Let's say they've got no background. I was going to say no background in breathing, but I think we all qualify for some sort of background, otherwise we wouldn't be here. Where do people start with this?
So, I mean, the first thing would be to find an instructor who can show you how to do the methods. We have an online school where you have a webinar where I go through all the science and I show you the technique, and you can test out this SOMA method, which is, because a great thing with it is that it actually feels amazing. So on the subject of meditation, actually this is probably the best meditation technique I've ever come across. It gives you the benefits so fast, because what you're doing is you're holding your breath, right? Now, life is just a series of inhales and exhales. So when you hold your breath, you actually press pause on life for that moment. And according to the yoga, when you breathe, you create thoughts. So your thoughts are directly related to your breath. So erratic thinking leads to erratic breathing, which leads to erratic heart rate and things like that. So calm thoughts have calm rhythms, and it means you have a calm rhythm of breath as well. So what happens is when you hold your breath, okay, you actually, it's like pressing defrag on the hard disk of your computer, your operating system, because when you hold your breath, this is actually a fact as well, that the word inspiration what it means is to breathe in. So when you breathe in oxygen, that creates thought. So to become inspired, you breathe in. Okay, that's how you get inspired. Now, when you hold your breath with no air in the lungs, on your exhale, it's like shutting the thoughts off. And you go into this absolute no mind state, which is a really beautiful feeling. It's a beautiful feeling. And you only need to do it for a minute or minute 30. We train you up to being able to do it for minutes, several minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, even more. And you go into this deep, deep meditative state. And literally, if you try meditating and you've spent like hours like sitting down, not getting anywhere because your mind is just racing. It's like a monkey mind, and you're trying to do this kind of mindfulness techniques and it just doesn't feel like you can do it. Just try this and just see how quickly you get into that no mind state, that state that all these yogis have been talking about, the state of absolute oneness and bliss. And with the longer sessions where you're doing the rhythmic breathing with the breath retentions, you can expand these states, because even simply breathing following your breath, okay, is a meditation technique. And when you do it with our music and the breathing is kind of, guided through the music, that's what makes SOMA really stand out, is the music. You go into this kind of like hypnotic journey of your breath going in time with the music, and then you're holding your breath at the right time and all this time to the music. The whole sequence is like the really powerful mindfulness meditation. And you go into these very, very deep meditative states. So it's not just breath work. It's not pranayama. It's more than that, much more than that.
Yeah, it's almost like meditation combined, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so the 21-day program, is that the one you're referring to, that people can do online?
Yeah, so the 21-day program, actually, what that does is so you should never just go straight into something. As you're a fitness trainer, like you got to build up slowly. If you want to safely lift weights, you're not going to start with the heaviest weight right from the start. So same thing with the 21-day protocol. If you want to go to those deep, profound visionary states, which you can get into through kumbhaka, where you're holding your breath for long periods of time, where you're having these like DMT-like experiences, you want to build up to that. That's why I have this 21-day protocol where you're doing a little bit every day and you're building up and up. And we do it with instructors, so we make sure you're doing the technique properly. With the wonders of technology, we can do this globally, and we don't have to be in the room with you, and you can just plug into our webinar and have an instructor train you in making sure you do the technique properly. That's the miracle that we have of the internet.
And Niraj, a lot of our listeners are familiar with Wim Hof style breathing. How does that differ to SOMA?
So Wim's obviously is a good friend of mine. I actually produced all the soundtrack to the Wim Hof method. We've worked close together. Wim's thing's very much about the ice. It really revolves around ice baths. Okay, and he's also focused on the breath retentions as well. Like the Wim Hof method is a form of kumbhaka, but his method, the way you do it, it's more kind of high intensity, and it can actually create too much fire in people who already have a lot of fire. So SOMA, because we use music and it's very harmonic, the way you breathe to prepare for the kumbhaka, it's a lot more gentle and it's more balancing, so it's more accessible to a wide group of people. Wim Hof's really good for people who've got very low energy and they're apathetic and they may be depressed. Okay, it's really good also for men who want to get into those fiery states, but I find like a lot of women are put off by doing ice baths and all of that. I'm much more about the opposite, the heat, the saunas, and I'm into these like very musical journeys. So, and also we don't just have that one technique. We have a whole school of pranayama inside the SOMA. So we teach you all the breathing techniques.
And Niraj, I know you worked also with the competitors in the Mexican Olympics. Can you tell us a bit about what you've seen, even anecdotal evidence of how the CO2 tolerance and this type of breath work's actually helped with athletes?
Yeah, I didn't directly work with them. I just have been in touch with people who did, and that was a strange phenomenon. So in the Mexican Olympics in the 80s, people were winning, breaking records, and it was done at high, because the Olympics were held at high altitude. That's the theory that goes, that they were becoming more efficient using oxygen. They were like kind of in high altitude training, and that sparked a lot of the movement towards high altitude training. Now, I have a good friend called Ben Greenfield, who you may have heard of, who's one of the top kind of athletes in the world. He's got a very popular podcast as well.
Yeah.
And he swears by high altitude training and hypoxic training. He uses our SOMA techniques for that. So he swears by it. I've also helped recently a professional football player with using our SOMA techniques, and he had ulcerative colitis, so I got him back onto the pitch because he wasn't able to play. He was off the game for a year and a half, but he's back playing again. And he swears by now these breathing techniques, giving him the energy to be able to have more stamina in the game. So it's one of those things. It's hard to explain. I can tell you stories, but unless you go and do it, it's one of those things you need to actually experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a final question about breath. Are you familiar with Patrick's book, The Oxygen Advantage, and the Bolt score? Have you ever measured your or any of your clients' Bolt scores to see the difference?
Which scores are you talking about, sorry?
So Patrick talks about a measurement that he calls the Bolt score, and it's basically a measurement of how long you can hold your breath for without stress.
Pause.
Exactly. And then he sort of measures that after doing breathing for a couple of weeks and noticing the huge difference.
Yeah. So that's the principles of pranayama again. So the Russian scientists like Buteyko, which is where he gets all his stuff from, they spend a lot of close contact with Himalayan yogis, because if you look where Russia is, that part of Russia, it's in close contact with Tibet, and the Tibetan yogis, Tibetan monks in Himalaya. There was a lot of obviously migration between the two. So that's just classic pranayama. As I said, the more efficient using oxygen, the longer you can hold your breath. The higher the tolerance you have to carbon dioxide. That's the magic of what we're talking about here. And that's the classic pranayama. So obviously with SOMA, the same thing's going to happen. We're just doing it in a bit more of a fun way than some of the Buteyko exercises.
And what are your thoughts about breath through the nose versus the mouth?
Oh, yeah. So there's a time and place for mouth breathing. Usually when you're talking, for example, you have to breathe through your mouth. Singing, you often will breathe through your mouth. And when you're extreme exercising, where your oxygen demand is really high. So, but at rest, we don't need to breathe through the mouth. Okay? We should always try and breathe through the nose as much as possible. The nose has filters, air filters. It's like an air filtration system for your body. Filters the air, cleans the air, it warms the air, and it prepares the air for absorption, for the lungs to be able to use the air efficiently. And it also, nose breathing also stimulates carbon dioxide and nitric oxide production, which are vasodilators. But if you breathe through your mouth, you bypass all the filters, and it also stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. So mouth breathing is like a adrenaline producing. It's like sympathetic stimulating. So it's energy producing. Nose breathing is more calm and relaxed. So at rest, if you want to not get panic attacks and anxiety, just switch to what you breathe through. Be mindful of, are you breathing through your nose or your mouth? And then that's when you'll start seeing the benefits.
Awesome. Niraj, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience about breath, or I guess any tips about curing yourself through breath or anything?
Yeah, I mean, okay, the breath is just a one piece. Okay, and it's a very, very, very important piece. In fact, I would argue that it's the most important piece, is to get your breathing right. But then there's also other things like your exercise, your diet, nutrition, things that you eat, how you think, your well-being. And I suppose the most important of all, I'd say, even before the breath, is the answer to this question, I would say, which is every morning when you wake up, okay, you got to ask yourself this question. Are you waking up with absolute enthusiasm to do a hard day's work, or are you waking up feeling like you have to do what you have to do just to survive? Because if you're waking up feeling like you're having to do something, if you're feeling like you have to do this to survive, or you're doing this because you're just trying to fit in, okay, somebody else told you that you have to do this, or if you're not compassionate, if you're not feeling enthusiastic to be compassionate, okay, and you're just trying to like be nice to people and you're faking it, okay, all that leads to is chronic stress. And chronic stress, one of the first signs of chronic stress, when you know that it's like, you need to do something about it, is that tight chest, is when you start to hold in your breath on the inhale and your inhalation. And when your breath starts going erratic, okay, there's another way to see this. And you'll feel it. You'll feel this in your body. You'll feel these things happening in your body. And that's when you need to make a change, in your life. You need to start a series of, self-inquiry questions to figure out what it is that you really want to do. And that's the best advice I can give, because like I didn't listen to my heart. I ignored all the symptoms of stress for too long, and I ended up getting very sick. So I really recommend you listen more to your body.
Essentially, listen to your breath.
Yeah, your subconscious mind doesn't talk to you in voices in your head. Like your conscious mind is a voice in your head. Your subconscious mind talks to you through feelings, emotions, and bodily symptoms. So yeah, you got to pay attention to those bodily symptoms.
Absolutely. That's great advice, Niraj. And just before I let you go, I've got to ask a bit of a personal question. Do you have a tattoo?
No.
So it's a question we ask all our guests. And I was intrigued to ask you. I thought you might have something to do with the breath, or pranayama, or some sort of, I don't know, yogi tattoo. But have you ever thought about it, or?
A lot of my friends have tattoos. I live on a bit of a hippie island where almost every other person has a tattoo. But to be honest, my mind changes quite. What I like art wise, like creativity wise, I change quite frequently. There's some things I absolutely love and they stick with me. So I prefer like, things like necklaces, like with kind of symbols and talismans that I can take off that aren't permanent.
Absolutely. I get you.
Yeah.
Look, Niraj, thanks again for your time and for sharing your work. And obviously we'll include everything in the show notes for people.
Oh, right. Perfect.
Awesome.
Yes.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.